so will they speak, and this would turn to my reproach. Yea, and I myself would think it blame of another maiden who did such things in despite of her friends, her father and mother being still alive, and was conversant with men before the day of open wedlock. But, stranger, heed well what I say, that as soon as may be, thou mayest gain at my father's hands an escort and a safe return. Thou shalt find a fair grove of Athene, a poplar grove near the road, and a spring wells forth therein, and a meadow lies all around. There is my father's demesne, and his fruitful close, within the sound of a man's shout from the city. Sit thee down there, and wait until such time as we may have come into the city, and reached the house of my father. But when thou deemest that we are got to the palace, then go up to the city of the Phaeacians, and ask for the house of my father Alcinous, high of heart. It is easily known, and a young child could be thy guide, for no wise like it are builded the houses of the Phaeacians. So goodly is the palace of the hero Alcinous. But when thou art within the shadow of the halls and the court, pass quickly through the great chamber, till thou comest to my mother, who sits at the hearth, in the light of the fire, weaving yarn of sea-purple stain, a wonder to behold. Her chair is leaned against a pillar, and her maidens sit behind her, and there my father's throne leans close to hers, wherein he sits and drinks his wine, like an immortal. Pass thou by him, and cast thy hands about my mother's knees, that thou mayest see quickly and with joy the day of thy returning, even if thou art from a very far country. If but her heart be kindly disposed toward thee, then is there hope that thou shalt see thy friends, and come to thy well-builded house, and to thine own country. Christ almighty, I do not know why it took me so long to read today's passage. It really isn't anything difficult to say in it, but my God, I think I had to do 2 takes of every single line. To give you a little sense, because I mean, I'm not about to release the raw files of these with me clearing my throat and saying expletives that I tend to avoid when I actually publish these things. But reading the passage alone today took about 5 minutes. Compare that to where you are listening to this in the podcatcher to see what the final product actually looks like. That's how much extra space there is that I've edited out of what you're hearing. We are in the penultimate episode of Book 6, and I don't know if y'all remember back, all the way back to yesterday, but I had promised you that I had done a little bit of research on temples of the gods, and I did it, everyone. In fact, I did so much that I'm going to split this research and my report on it between today and tomorrow. In fact, maybe, just maybe, I will eventually turn this into an article that I can put up on Patreon. A little foreshadowing to the end of this episode when I talk about patreon.com/gruntworkpod. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about these Greek temples of the gods, what they are, where they show up, why certain temples to certain gods appear in certain places. I had all these questions, and I went through them pretty rigorously to find out what I could find. Okay. Before we do that, I guess, is there anything in this passage that we need to cover? Seemed pretty straightforward today, even though I couldn't speak it. This is the continuation of Nausicaa's monologue to Odysseus, telling him how to enter the city, that she can't accompany him for fear of a scandal, and so giving him directions on how to find the palace and what to do once he gets there, and certainly the kind-hearted parents that she has will see him on his way back home. That's really all that's passing by here. No conflict, no, hey, Odysseus, you got to watch out for this. Or, if you don't do it this way, then this is going to happen. Nothing like that. Pretty straightforward. Just go do this, and there it is, up there on the hill. You can't miss it. So, we'll see what Odysseus does tomorrow. But back to the research. We all love some research, don't we? So, this is going to be messy. I'm just going to kind of report as I'm reading through what I've compiled here. Hopefully it will make sense. One thing I found was that these temples of the gods were representations of the actual presence of a god. So in today's passage, we talk about a fair grove of Athena. I don't know that there's a temple there, but Yesterday, we talked about the literal temple of Poseidon that resides in the city. And the idea behind these, now, I would love to see a construction of this. I didn't find any like blueprints, which would be interesting to look at. I don't know if any exist. My research didn't take me in that direction, but my understanding is there is a sort of structure that either can or cannot be entered, but usually the activity around the temple happens outside of it, in that the inside of it is where the god is represented or resides in that region. And outside of the temple would be where the altar is, where folks would do sacrifices or offerings, hecatombs. We've heard that word a lot. So the altar is different than the actual building, which is called naos, I think. And these are all kind of housed and bounded by a sacred precinct called temenos. So we got our building, we got our altar, we got our just general surroundings. And the question of why certain gods in certain places is what you think it is, I think, based on their domain, right? If you are near a sea or a harbor, you're going to see a temple to Poseidon. If you're in the fields, you're going to see probably a temple to Demeter. However, there can also be local myths and stories that found cities or towns that are anchored to one of the gods. And in those cases, you might see a temple to Zeus or whoever is anchoring the lineage of that city in honor of that god. There are two other examples of why a certain god in a certain place, and these I didn't quite get as much in depth on because, a rabbit hole goes so far and you only have so much time in this world. But also it can be tied to like civic power, economic and political needs. So, which I would assume differs depending on which city or town you're in or what land you're governing. So I don't know that would be tied to a specific god of politics, so to speak, so much as which god best governs what your town requires. But let's go back to the kind of architecture here. Though I don't have a blueprint here, this is essentially what I have found in terms of what these looked like and how they operated. We have our kind of sanctuary, our space, right? And this is set apart from the towns. It's typically enclosed by a wall of some sort that usually contained a temple, an altar, as we said, the temple being the place of the godly presence. There would be areas for dedications. There would be sacred vegetation, springs, and even subsidiary buildings for a variety of purposes. So all of those things need to make space for the townsfolk or the people offering sacrifice, particularly the hecatombs, which are kind of the bigger community offerings, as we've read early on. Remember on the beach when they were slaughtering all those cows? So it needed to make space to include all those people for all those activities. However, the temple interior was not used for any of that. All of the worshiping activities happened outside. The altars were the literal chopping block. This is the working surface of a cult where they would burn, they would do blood sacrifices. It would kind of be the head of communal dining rhythms in order to make the god-human relationship visible to everybody that is attending. And one thing to kind of keep in mind, I'm always very interested in where academics disagree with one another. Not that I understand it, but just that I am someone who thinks there's always multiple explanations for something or a combination of things. I really am not a big fan of binary thinking. So when we're talking about these things and their uses, that these areas stayed alive for generations, which means that culture, language, practice, all of those things are changing over different periods of time. and might have slightly different uses. We'll get into some of the functional stuff tomorrow, but let's keep going and just finish out some other things we would find around here. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is that almost always one of these temples would have a statue of the god or goddess that it is in honor of. So you would see a statue of Poseidon in a temple to Poseidon. You'd see a statue of Athena or Zeus or whoever the case might be. And you might even see some statues of things that are associated with them, divine things like eagles with Zeus or bulls with Poseidon. The last thing I think I'll mention today before we go into tomorrow's research is there's even some logic to the geography of where these temples are placed and who they're associated with. So we talked about, fields being associated with Demeter or coastal sanctuaries, being associated with Poseidon. And I'm curious, and I think the scholars would even agree that there's very little definitive proof of, were these gods created to fill the purpose of where they're being erected. For instance, is Demeter created because they need a god of grain growing, agriculture? Over the generations of telling these divine stories, does Demeter essentially get invented because they are erecting a temple to pray to someone, and just over time the identity gets shaped? Because you find with weather cults or temples that appear on mountains or the peaks of hills will often be associated with Zeus, the temple to Zeus. You've got forest and river temples to Artemis, and it's a chicken or the egg, I think. I mean, as far as what I've been able to see so far, is is it that the daily human need for hunt requires someone to pray to in order for you to find and kill something to feed your family or village, and therefore they begin praying to some unknown thing, and over time Artemis slowly emerges from that? I'd love to ask an expert about these things. But tomorrow, as I said, we'll go into some of the functional research I found about the temples. And since today is the penultimate episode, I will just remind you all that you can go to patreon.com/gruntworkpod and support this show. Your contributions mean that we get to do this stuff day in and day out, and that it will continue to live hosted out there for anyone to find for years to come. We have a goal to be net zero, meaning that we just want the network to pay for itself, and we are about halfway to that goal. You can really, really help us meet it and exceed it, because it gives us all kinds of new opportunities to explore new shows, give you new and awesome bonus content, and just really ensure the stability of the network over time, particularly when we're doing daily shows. This show wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have contributors to the Countdown of Monte Cristo or our other podcast, Movie Memory Machine. We have more ideas for shows we want to do down the road. You can make that happen by going to patreon.com/gruntworkpod. And I'll give you a little cheat code. Starting May 1st, we are going to be doing Supporter Month, giving back to all of you who contribute and listen to these shows by giving everyone who wants it a free month of Patreon. I'll go into more of what comes with that in a bit, but you can go over to patreon.com/gruntworkpod right now and sign up for free, and you'll get a few freebies right out the gate. But during the month of May, you will get access to everything we've ever done on our network Patreon for the last 9 years. There's a lot of content on there. I don't know how much of it's going to be interesting to those of you here just for the Greek mythology of it all, but it's there and somebody's got to listen to it. So again, patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Deeply appreciate anything you can do. I deeply appreciate you being here and listening day after day. And of course, if you haven't already, go rate the show 5 stars, leave a short review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, subscribe and comment on YouTube, and of course, share the website, share the YouTube channel with anyone you know that you think might enjoy what we're doing here day in and day out. So until tomorrow when we cover the finale of Book 6. Until then, okay, goodbye. Odyssey is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. The show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Odyssey, written by Homer. Theme song by Neuroflow. You can support this show and other shows like it by going to patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.